Hello Team FD and welcome back to Sunday Vibes. We're not back in the pub yet, we're still in isolation, but spirits are high. And shout out to any key workers who are watching this. We appreciate all of your efforts. And to reward you for tuning in across the entire fan base, we've got two of our finest with me today. It's Patrick Van Straten.
Hello.
And Doogie Critchley.
Hey,
And we have a pretty up-to-date episode for you because these rumours have resurfaced of late. The rumours that Don Copleone wants us to discuss. He's asked us, how do you envisage Timo Werner fitting in at Liverpool? This has been talked about for months now, but like I said, it's come back to the fore. Last Sunday, RB Leipzig head of football Oliver Mintzlaff insisted that Liverpool are yet to open talks. But Bild claimed that the Reds have a 65% chance of signing him and that they're in pole position. He's also learning English, that old narrative. That's always trotted out, isn't it? That's when you know you're on the cusp of a move, Doogie. It feels fairly redundant asking this, but I reckon you've got some lovely stats for us, some colour for us. So why should Liverpool really make him their primary transfer target?
Yeah, well, as you say, it's a move that's been discussed for a while, and it's been obvious for quite a while why he is ready for a truly elite European club. I think the first thing to probably acknowledge here is that The Athletic claimed last month that he has a release clause in his contract which is worth £51 million if a deal is struck this month, so April 2020, and obviously there's only 8 days left of April at the time of recording. So Liverpool need to get this done fairly quickly, but it's been pretty obvious for a while that Timo Werner was going right to the top from his days at Stuttgart, where he looked fantastic, then signing for RB Leipzig in June 2016 for a club record, I think it was €10 million, and what a return he's been since. So he's operated at about 0.4 goals per game across his entire Bundesliga career, but considering that included about 13 goals in just over 90 games at Stuttgart, he really has upped it at Leipzig. And this season you've seen him be probably in the top 3 or 4 strikers in the world, I would argue. I mean, it's 21 goals, 7 assists in about 25 Bundesliga games. I think only Lewandowski and Ciro Immobile have scored more in Europe's top 5 leagues, more than Messi, Benzema, Cristiano Ronaldo, whoever you want to name, Aguero, Kane. He's been right at the top. And it's also his ability to play not just as a number 9, but coming in off that left wing, which you've seen him do to devastating effect this season, that makes him such an attractive proposition for Liverpool. And he's a pretty well-rounded forward. He matches sort of elite shot output of about 4.2 shots per 90 with a healthy amount of key passes. I think it's about 1.5, and a couple of dribbles a game as well. All which would put him comfortably in the bracket of competing with Mane, Salah, Firmino as well. And his expected goals and assists per 90 ratio this season is quite extraordinary. It's 1.11, which is far above Liverpool's current front 3. And for that price, he just seems like he's ready-made for that move. And for that price, he just seems like he's going to be potentially a massive bargain in a summer when clubs might not have that much funding. So for me, it's an absolute no-brainer.
Absolutely. He's definitely the jewel in their crown, isn't he? And clearly him and Nagelsmann are super simpatico. He's definitely got another level out of him. Pato, it's not entirely obvious where he would play in that front line at Liverpool. So my questions to you, would he be immediately first choice? Is it worth moving one of those on for him? And do you think he would go to Liverpool without guarantees of first team football now that Leipzig are challenging for the title? He will win silverware, seemingly, in Germany with Nagelsmann. Is there going to be a bit of doubt there creeping in, seeing as he is hitting such good form under his new manager?
I don't think he'll go unless he is guaranteed first team football. Whenever you change clubs, you expect that maybe there'll be 10, 15 games before you're guaranteed first team player. But I think he's got a reasonable... he can be pretty confident that he deserves to be in that first team. He's having the best season out of any attacker at RB Leipzig or at Liverpool. I think if he came to the Premier League in the form he's in right now, he would probably... I mean, the only person who could really challenge him for the title of the league's best striker would be Aguero on current form. I think he's now quite significantly ahead of Kane and obviously has a much better injury record. I think we all assume Aubameyang will leave this summer. So, yeah, I think that probably if you wanted to keep all the players they already have and add Werner, the obvious thing to do is go to a 4-2-3-1 and just kind of assume that you're going to overrun teams and that maybe Fabinho can do enough defensively to keep you solid. But I don't know if that works just because of how attacking Trent Alexander-Arnold's been this season. They've really changed their system a lot, so their midfielders don't really do very much at all. Their midfielders now are like quite conservative. They sit quite deep. Their job is to keep possession and shuttle the ball out to the wings, and it's actually Robertson and Alexander-Arnold who are doing the majority of ball progression and creativity from deep. I think that if you put Werner in there, you lose a midfielder, and as a result, you're going to have to keep Trent a little bit more reserved. And so it would require Klopp to do a significant amount of rejigging. On the other hand, I think it's probably worth it because Werner is that good. I mean, he's 24 years old, and I think I can understand a little bit of caution because his numbers have kicked on so much this season, and that does tend to happen under Nagelsmann. But even if we look at his numbers from last season, he was at 0.82 expected goals and assists per game, which is better than Firmino this year, better than any season of Mane's career. It's not that far behind Salah. He's got the best expected assist numbers of any of those players. He's got the best expected goals numbers of any of those players. It just feels like he is such an all-round threat, and he's so much younger that they would be silly not to do this, even if it required them to sell somebody. The problem is, I think that the player that they would have to sell would be Firmino, and I think Liverpool fans will take to that really badly because Liverpool fans are now living in like a fantasy world where they think that Firmino is a unique player, and as much as I love Firmino, I think he's a fantastic player. He's not unique. He's replaceable. And Werner, as I've said, is a better dribbler. He's a better creator, and he's a better goal scorer. That said, they might find that they have the largest number of suitors for Mane because we're seeing rumours today that Real Madrid are going to be interested in Mane. So one way or another, there's going to be a tough decision to make, whether that decision is about formation and style of play or whether it's about sacrificing a player. So the question is, what does Klopp want to do and what does he feel is going to disrupt his squad the least?
Fascinating. I was just thinking there, as you mentioned, the transfer merry-go-round, that it's also surfaced recently that AC Milan are hell-bent on getting Ralf Rangnick in as sporting director or something in a similar capacity, right? So if RB Leipzig were to lose Timo Werner and Ralf Rangnick in one summer, that would be a massive dent in their aspirations to get to the top of German football, right? Doogie, RB Leipzig, do you think they're any closer to displacing Bayern Munich under Julian Nagelsmann? I mean, we've hinted at it already, but is there any way that RB Leipzig can convince him to stay?
I think they've done well to keep him to this stage, really, and I don't think they'd really begrudge him leaving, although obviously they'd be pretty disappointed to make a comparatively small amount of money on someone who's probably going to be one of the world's best strikers for the next 6 to 7 years. Obviously, Leipzig have put up a fantastic title challenge this year, but just before we broke for this pandemic, it felt like Bayern were really sort of getting everything into gear, really. Even though it was quite close still, they were getting a lot of their defensive resources back. It felt like it was, again, just going to be another Bayern march to the title. But Leipzig deserve a lot of credit for, I think they were winning at the halfway stage of the winter break. So I can't really see that happening. And then, yeah, as you say, this would be a really big loss for them. But you always just think with the RB scouting network that they'll have the next target lined up. They're always aware of when to sell and when to buy the next generation in. So yeah, massive loss. But then I slightly disagree with Pato. I think I'd rather sell Mane than Firmino, really, just because I feel like Mane has the most replaceable attributes in that I think Salah's a better one-on-one, sort of a better innovator around the box. I think his shot numbers suggest that. I think his goals over the last couple of years suggest that, although Mane has caught up. And Mane's game relies a lot more on just express pace, which, as he's 27 now, you could see that decreasing in the next few years, whereas Salah seems to have a bit more one-on-one skill about him. Maybe I've got that wrong. Liverpool fans, let me know. And I do think Firmino offers so much in terms of final third build-up. Like, he makes it so easy for Mane and Salah to really operate, just in and around the box, coming in from those cutting runs, etc. So I'd go Werner to replace Mane if you had to. But at this price, maybe they don't need to. I just don't think Liverpool will have the finances to go for. I've heard lots of people talk about Sancho as well. I don't think you can get Sancho and Werner in one summer. If you're Liverpool right now, I think they'll have to, if they want to get Sancho in, they'll have to sell one of the front three, but I think they can just do Werner without it.
Well, if the publications are to be believed, right, then we're gearing up for a big summer on Merseyside, because Milan publication Libero also claimed that Liverpool have made contact with Marcelo Brozovic's agent of Inter Milan, and of course he is having an absolutely fantastic season. His 19-20 stats read a little bit like this: 23 league games, out of possible 25 started, 3 goals, 5 assists, 3.9 tackles and interceptions, 1.5 key passes, almost 70 passes a game with a 90% pass accuracy. 2 shots as well from that deep lying playmaker position he seems to inhibit at Inter Milan. So I think he's a player that we all agree can play at the top level, but that would also mean wholesale changes to Liverpool's midfield. So with one eye sort of on Italian football, Doogie, do you see any legitimacy in this rumour?
I do, yeah. I think it makes a lot of sense, mainly because Milner's now 34, Lallana's leaving this summer, so they have a space in their squad, which is often quite crucial. Naby Keita has had a lot of injuries over his last 2 years, and Ox has missed over 50 games since he joined in January a couple of years ago. So in terms of getting someone who is regularly fit and who can perform at an elite level, which Brozovic certainly can, I think he'd be one of my first port of calls if I was trying to build a squad this summer. The only downside is he's 27, which is not old by any stretch, but he's not 23, he's not 24. But yeah, I think he looks instantly ready to improve that Liverpool midfield long term, especially with Fabinho being a little bit more shaky this season than he was at times last year. Henderson's been phenomenal, and we all know that Wijnaldum is now in his 30s as well. So for the long-term future of that midfield, Klopp should definitely consider Brozovic, and I think it'd be a really exciting signing.
Fabrizio Romano, Pat, is saying in Calcio Mercato that the Reds have sort of dug out a €60 million release clause in his contract, which is set to expire in 2022. So Inter's hand might be sort of forced with this. A Timo Werner and Marcelo Brozovic summer doesn't really bode well for the rest of the Premier League, does it?
No. Brozovic would be a pretty short-term move. I mean, you get Brozovic in because you think, right, we're going to win the league this year and we want to win the next 3 league titles. So it would make sense in that regard, because they've got this advantage over City right now, and City are going to have to do some serious work around their squad this summer and next summer as well. I think you probably need somebody like Brozovic to play alongside Fabinho if you do want to go to a 4-2-3-1. I kind of agree with Doogie. I think Fabinho has actually not had a very good season at all. I really like Fabinho, but I think he is substantially overrated now. And if he were next to like peak Oxlade-Chamberlain or peak Naby Keita, then I would have no concerns at all, because I think those guys are both fantastic all-round midfielders. If he's next to a now pretty old Jordan Henderson or an old Jorginho Wijnaldum who's limited at the best of times, then I worry a little bit more. I would want to pair him with a real lights-out midfielder if I was going to try and solidify that place at the top of the league. So, yeah, I think Brozovic would make sense. 60 mil is quite a lot for a guy of his age, but you probably will get 4 good seasons out of him, and that's probably the going rate now. On the other hand, they haven't got to this point by doing moves like this. Like, yes, they spent a huge amount on Keita and on Alisson, but those guys were both young. We haven't really seen them pay over the odds for an older player, except Van Dijk, who was still younger than Brozovic is now and is a centre-back, so will tend to last a little bit better. So I don't know, really. I think it would be quite an unusual thing to see Liverpool do, and it's the kind of move we see them linked with every summer, but they never actually pull the trigger on it. I would not be surprised if it turned out to be paper talk, because I think generally they have a really clear transfer strategy, and it's not to go for moves like this. But that said, if they got him, I think I would certainly think that they've done very, very well.
So if you're Michael Edwards, Pat, the Liverpool sporting director, do you go for Timo Werner and Brozovic in one summer, or do you drop them two in pursuit of Jadon Sancho, like Doogie was discussing?
It depends a little bit what the price is on Sancho, because Werner seems like such a bargain. But I'd probably be tempted to go Sancho. Like, don't get me wrong, Werner's a better player now, and really sorts out that front line. But Sancho he's not a significant downgrade, that's for sure. And he's homegrown. And if you get him in, he could be in your team for the next 12 years. And pretty much having Jadon Sancho in your team is going to guarantee a top-class attack for a decade. So I'd probably go for Sancho in that case, in this very specific scenario. Because also, you know, he could play off the left, he could play off the right. Like, he just solves problems. I mean, Werner does that a little bit as well, but I don't think you have to ask yourself such a difficult question about who you might have to sell if you sign Sancho.
Okay, interesting. What about you, Doogie? Same question to you.
I would actually probably go with Werner, just because he will be. I think the price for Sancho seems to be about 120 million, which, from what I read about a couple of months ago, Liverpool just aren't in that bracket this summer in terms of where their funds are, in terms of where they're at compared to financial fair play. So they can't really afford him this summer, which I think is the main reason why they have focused so much on Werner. And also the fact that Sancho plays in the same position as Salah, who I've already said I think is, you know, the player I'd least like to lose out of that front three. So I'd definitely go for Werner. I think Brozovic is just, you know, like the cherry on top. They don't need Brozovic, but he would improve them if they had him. And would make their squad just ridiculous, frankly, or at least their starting 11 ridiculous, because they do have some areas that I would strengthen as well, particularly in, you know, covering in fullback areas. I think it's Joe Gomez and Klein who are their right back cover, and then it's James Milner who is their left back cover. So a left back this summer, you know, a comparatively cheap left back who's willing to pay second fiddle would be another player that I definitely pick up.
Yeah, we've talked about Sergio Reguilon before, haven't we, as well? I'm seeing some notes here down from you, Doogie, about Mainz's Aaron, or is it Aaron Martin, and Pervis Estupinan. What can you tell us about them?
So Aaron Martin is someone who's, you know, just shows up. I can't say I watch Mainz all the time, but he shows up very well statistically. He's a very solid defender. But Pervis Estupinan is really interesting. So he's a Watford loanee. He's been sent on about 5 or 6 loans in the last 5 years, and he's now at Osasuna. He's 22, he's Ecuadorian. And by all accounts, he has been awesome this year. I think he's matching sort of 5.5 tackles and interceptions, which for a fullback is enormous, with a healthy amount of key passes and nearly 2 dribbles a game as well. And it continues Watford's policy of just loaning out players to sort of growing sort of mid-table clubs around the top 5 leagues, like they did with Luca Bacchio, and was it Chucho Hernandez as well, and João Pedro as well, who they brought in January. And just farming them out for experience, and then hopefully either selling them on or making them ready-made for their first team. It's what the Pozzos seem to do. So whether they'd be willing to let Estupinan go, I'm not quite sure. And there's also been talk of Atletico Madrid being interested in him. So they might have a bit of a fight on. But he looks like a really interesting prospect.
Fascinating. Pato, left back. Have you got any other options for us in the backup mould?
Well, I don't know about other options. Like, I really like Estupinan. Like, he's come up a couple of times on maybe on the podcast, and I think on a couple of scripts. And if you can get him off Watford, then I think that's great. But Watford do tend to say, "Oh, you're interested in one of our players? That's going to be 50 mil." And I think he's probably ready to go back there. So I think maybe he does a season in the Prem. Reguilon, though, would be fantastic. Again, I think he'll probably get better offers than being Liverpool's backup left back, because Robertson is still 25. Like, it's a bit of a tough sell. But Doogie's absolutely right that I target those positions if I'm Klopp and Edwards. Maybe Marcelo Saracchi, who is at Leipzig but has gone out on loan. I can't remember where, but he's really struggled for minutes there. But he looks like an amazing defensive fullback. So I think, again, it kind of depends what you want your roles to be. Like, if you're recruiting for these positions, assuming you're going to continue to play the formation you played this season, it's very, very different from how you recruit for them if you're going to, say, a 4-2-3-1. How do you plan to replace Trent Alexander-Arnold if he gets injured? It's almost impossible. Robertson's a little bit easier to replace. He's a more conventional fullback, but if he's still expected to do so much ball progression and so much final third creation, then I go for someone like Aaron Martin. If I want my fullback to be just a lockdown defensive player because we're going to play one more striker next season, then I'm much more likely to go for Estupiñán. So these questions, these kind of macro questions, need to be answered in order for them to make these smaller decisions on individual players.
Yes, agreed. My audio just catching up there. Maybe they go back to Barcelona to see if Junior Firpo is faring any better. Well, not any better, if they're willing to let him leave and cut their losses, because he's not exactly adjusted to life very well, has he? Or maybe Nelson Semedo. Okay, let's move on to quickfire questions then. And if the document loads, there we go. I can shout out the people who've sent them in. Okay, so this is quite a big question. So maybe we can elaborate on it in future episodes or on the podcast. But let's cover it quite quickly. It's from UNSO4, and he's asked, who should Everton, Wolves and Leicester sign this summer in order to break into the top 6 next season? In order to keep this quite punchy, why don't we take one team each? I'm going to delegate them as a task to you boys. Doogie, Everton, talk to me.
Everton, I think I'd be looking for centre-backs, really. I don't think Michael Keane's had his best year. Yerry Mina has looked okay. Mason Holgate's really come into his own, but that is it in terms of centre-backs. So I'd definitely get another centre-back in. I think Leighton Baines might well retire at the end of this season, whenever that is. So another left-back. And then they're really looking at how to sort of maximise their creativity from midfield. I'm not sure whether Ancelotti will start next season playing 4-4-2. And it feels like Gylfi Sigurdsson has sort of hit a sort of, I was going to say a bump in the road. I'd say a roadblock, full stop. So I'd be looking to move on Gylfi Sigurdsson, especially considering he's on pretty hefty wages. One player who I think could be achievable is Mario Götze. He hasn't signed a new deal with any other club. He's a free agent this summer. Supposedly Roma want him and supposedly Arsenal want him. But I think Mario Götze, if used in the right system in a 4-2-3-1, playing as a number 10, could absolutely rip it up at Everton. Because even when he played last year, I think it was about 14 goal contributions in the league. Hasn't played a lot this year since the arrival of Branton and Torgan Hazard. But he looks like he really, really improved them quite quickly. So, yeah, I haven't got a name for you in terms of centre-backs, but I'll think about one. But Mario Götze would be really exciting.
Okay, maybe we'll arrive at one at the end of this section. Patrick, Wolves.
Wolves have got some players to replace, I think. João Moutinho obviously getting up there now, so they need a guy who can do a bit of creation from deep midfield, who's also pretty press resistant and is going to contribute defensively. That's kind of a hard ask to find that guy, because those players tend to be already at the very top level or a little bit past their peak, like João Moutinho. So it might be worth going to some of the bigger clubs and seeing if there are guys who are kind of 31 and they're thinking about moving on. Even if those guys are people like, I don't know, Arturo Vidal or something, that could be kind of fun. They definitely need another forward as well. Raúl Jiménez has had a good season. I'm not quite sure why everyone's talking like he's had this world-class season. He's been good. And he remains a good forward who fits the team. On the other hand, there are rumours that Spurs would be willing to pay 60 million for him. I think if you get that offer, you definitely take it. But regardless of what they do with him, they need another forward. They brought in Cutrone. Cutrone went out. They brought in Pedence now, who's more of a wide man. But I don't know, they always look thin up front to me. And when Jota gets injured, it's really, really hard to see where the inspiration comes from. They're often pretty hopeful in attack. Plus, their midfield hasn't contributed as much this year as it has last year. Like I said, Moutinho's a year older, and Neves has had a really, really bad season. Neves has quietly had an awful season. And so I would also be thinking about just like beefing that up, because I'd never really liked the Dendoncker signing. He's fine. He's nothing special. But I think they need to be looking for at least one starter, probably another centre back, because Vallejo has obviously not worked out for them, and another forward. But to be honest, they're kind of on the right trajectory. Like this question, like how do they break into the top 6? Like Leicester are going to finish in the top 6, right? So what do you do for them?
Well, we covered Leicester pretty extensively a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? Which is why I left them till last, really. Not just because I favour that team out of those 3. And it always boils down to replacing Jamie Vardy, doesn't it? It's slightly more interesting thinking about a right winger who is going to be an upgrade on Iosi Perez. I always think of Sabitzer from RB Leipzig, first and foremost, just because he's been ripping it up sort of from that side this season from a number of positions. And yeah, the forward line, Leicester is interchangeable, and I think he has that sort of intelligence, that sort of versatility. So yeah, I really like Sabitzer. If Paciencia continues to do well in Germany, maybe he could be brought in for between 20 and 30, but it's a difficult one with Leicester, a really difficult one. Kevin Volland, I think we mentioned on Continental Club, do get this contract. It is not up this year, but the year after, maybe. And he's an outstanding all-round forward, not in the same mould as Jamie Vardy, but there's not a lot of players who are, is there? It might be that they opt for someone a little bit younger, who's a little bit more high risk, like Osimhen from Lille, before his price goes absolutely through the roof. He is very much a poacher, isn't he? Majority of his shots arriving in the box. But yeah, I think Leicester, easier to get them in the top 6 than the other sides, but harder to replace the output of their existing personnel. And that's only because of Vardy, right? Okay, next question, because we ended up spending a decent amount of time on that. James Carlin, 11. Which of the following 5 players you can choose to could potentially take Chelsea to the title, effectively? So these are the 5 players. We'll both have to pick 2 with a minimal explanation. Sancho, Koulibaly, Onana, Ousmane Dembele, and Moussa Dembele. I can repeat those names for you if you like. That is Sancho, Koulibaly, Onana, Ousmane Dembele, and Moussa Dembele. So, Doogie, which 2 do you pick from that 5 to take Chelsea to the next level?
Onana, for obvious reasons. And then I'd probably go Sancho. But if you couldn't afford him, or if Man United went for him, then I think Ousmane Dembele would be a really good second choice there. But yeah, I'm not sure they want to go for Koulibaly with his price tag at his age. So yeah, Onana or Sancho for me. Okay,
great. Pat?
Same too. I think their centre-backs are pretty good. I think Koulibaly is too old to spend the kind of money on him you'd want to. Ousmane Dembele is not as good as Sancho and more injury-prone. Moussa Dembele is a downgrade on Tammy Abraham. Yeah, it just seems obvious to get Sancho and Onana out of those guys.
Nice. Okay, last quickfire then before we move on to our personal question. Which legend from your club would you bring back into your side today? If you could play them for the rest of the season, if you could bring them back after lockdown to save your season potentially, who would it be, Pat?
Oh, God. The temptation is to say Henry, because he's obviously like the best player in the history of the club. But arguably Vieira or Sol Campbell or Tony Adams would make a bigger impact right now. I mean, I'll say Vieira just because Vieira was like... I mean, to me, Vieira... I think he's quite clearly it's always weird to me when people talk about Scholes, Lampard and Gerrard as the debate for the best midfielder in Premier League history, given that when Scholes was at his peak, the debate was always Roy Keane or Patrick Vieira. I think Vieira maybe with the exception of Yaya Toure and a couple of and maybe some Gerrard and Lampard seasons, but across the whole time he was in England, he was probably the best midfielder I ever saw play in the league. And Arsenal need somebody like that. I mean, some authority in the centre of the park and just knowing where to be, just the intelligence coupled with the skill, coupled with the athleticism, coupled with like the leadership qualities. I mean, he just had everything you'd want in a player.
Nice. Doogie, I think this is the one that people are going to be really interested in, mate. Who saved Sunderland from the depths of League One?
It's got to be Kev, right? It's got to be Big Kev.
I was thinking Big Kev, and he would rip it up, and we do need goals. But I think actually Niall Quinn would do really well in League One because he's a lot more of a physical striker, and he just bosh defenders off left, right, centre. But for a more niche shout, you guys probably didn't even really take him in. But there was a centre back we had called Lamine Kone, who's about 6'5" and about 17 stone, and he was a monster of a man, and he would tear it up in League One. Could do with someone at the back, just keep it nice and steady. So I'd go Niall Quinn or Lamine Kone.
Nice.
Well, in many ways, Patrick, we just face a similar dilemma in that I could just say Henrik Larsson here and it would be completely right. But is that necessarily?
You should say Henrik Larsson.
Is that necessarily the most interesting answer?
Yes. He's the best player ever to play for your club.
Well, come on.
He is. How many world-class players have Celtic had? Like, I'm sure they'd claim they had guys in the 60s, but like, he was genuinely one of the best strikers in the world, playing in Scotland. It's mental.
In modern history, certainly, yeah. I mean, there's the Quality Street Kids. That was Dalglish's era. There's obviously the Lisbon Lions. That whole team from 1 to 11, just world class.
Oh, come on. It's the 60s.
Is it Archie Gemmell they always bang on about?
Archie Gemmell?
That's a Scotland thing, though, right? Because Archie Gemmell scored the winner against the Netherlands in like the 70s. I think at the 70-something World Cup or whatever.
I might be getting my Scotland.
Celtic had a player called Jimmy McGorry who scored about 400 goals. So, yeah, he could rival Henrik Larsson. But if we're talking modern history, yeah, it's got to be Henrik. Right, personal to end the show. Let me just pick one. What is the most overrated takeaway which everyone seems to love, bar yourself? That's from Brad Etheridge.
I don't. Of all the cuisines, I like Thai, I like pizza, I like Chinese, whatever. I'm happy with all of them. What I've always thought are quite overrated, full stop, is pork ribs. I always find them really difficult to eat, and there's never that much on them. So I'm going to go ribs.
Okay, takeaway ribs.
Yeah, do you ever get ribs in a takeaway? Probably not, but...
No, mate. That's a little insight into your life of opulence there. Takeaway ribs. Pat?
I feel like this is two questions, because it's like, what's the most overrated? But then it's like, everyone likes it, but you don't. Whereas something could be overrated, and I could still like it. Like, so for instance, I like Nando's, fine, but it's overrated. But it's, I'm not going to say it's bad. It's totally fine.
It's because Nando's has now got that connection to being comfy, right? To being carefree.
It's just not good though. It's always average. Like, it's never great. It's just fine. And it's like, I don't know. Whatever. Anyway. Also, you know what else is terrible? Pizza Hut is actually awful pizza.
No, the buffet.
Oh, okay, yeah. If you're there, but that's not what we're being asked. We're being asked about takeaway, Dukes. And the pizza at Pizza Hut, like, I always kind of thought, you know what? Any pizza, I'll be happy. It's pizza. Like, come on. But Pizza Hut pizza is genuinely not very nice. And also, Pizza Hut right now are treating their workers very badly. So I'm going to say Pizza Hut can suck it.
I knew you were going to say that as well.
Well, they can.
What I'm going to go with, do you know what? Just on the subject of pizza, I bought a Chicago Town frozen pizza the other day. Was it Chicago Town? Yeah, it must have been. With a stuffed crust, and it tasted exactly the same as Domino's, and it was 1/4 of the price. So it was a little bit of a revelation for me, to be perfectly honest, because you have to take out payday loans sometimes to get a Domino's, don't you? It's 16 quid a pizza. I'm gonna go. I think I'm gonna go Chinese, because I think it's very easy. I think it's more commonplace to get a bad Chinese than an exceptional one.
Yeah, it's easier to get wrong. I'm happy with that, but when it's right, ooh.
Yeah, the ceiling on Chinese is much higher.
Yeah, I need to establish, I need to lay down that I love Chinese food, but I think the majority of the time it will be a 6 or a 7. Whereas, no, I'm going to say the majority of the time it's a 6. Whereas for the takeaways, I think the quality is more guaranteed. Right, that's it. That's what we're ending on. Chinese food. That is Sunday Vibes for another week. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. Keep sending your suggestions in for what we should discuss. Normally put out the tweet on like a Tuesday or Wednesday, right? So keep your eyes peeled for that. Pat, you plugging the podcast?
Yeah, the Extra Time podcast / YouTube upload that it is now. It should be out. Should have gone out on Wednesday, where Zach, Chris, and I drafted teams composed of the best players from the Premier League in the 2010s. So it's not a team of the decade exactly, but it's the best players from then. We built competing 11s, and if you go to it, you can check them out and vote on which one you think is the best, which is mine, and then second is Zach's, and then third, I've got to be honest, it's Chris's.
Mine is for the thinking man. Okay, I've taken...
It's Rogue.
I have taken in chemistry. Team chemistry is a key factor, whereas I don't think you two have. Anyway, Doogie, what have you got to push?
Stat Wars, the champions came back on Wednesday if everything went to plan, so go check out that. I think it was Joe versus Harry Pinero. James Wayne, massive credit to him for getting it out during lockdown, so yeah, go check that out.
Of course it will go according to plan. Let's be optimistic. Right, that's it. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.